Hello. What a wonderful Christmas story that was, and I hope that I can continue and follow on from some of those points. My name's Dan Young. I work for a Cloud Foundry consultancy called Engineer Better, and what I'm about to give you is like a hopefully not more than that, 5-minute talk on what we've learned in the last 3 months working with a big bank trying to do some of these things we've been talking about tonight. So small batch sizes, fast feedback, and how we've managed to achieve some of those things in such a short time. Oh, that didn't work. It did work a minute ago. Let's forget that. So the context for this story is we are talking about a global financial institution. So it's a very, very risk-averse organization. They've got thousands of developers, and they've got so many developers, they're probably inside the top 10 organizations globally in terms of numbers of developers. So that puts it in context for you. And in that environment, they've got thousands of apps, and they've started to use Cloud Foundry very heavily. And if you're not familiar with Cloud Foundry, it's a platform as a service. One of the easiest ways of describing it is it's like Heroku, but you run it yourself, generally. There's also hosted versions of it, but it's an open source PaaS, which you can run on any cloud. It supports multiple different public clouds or VMware and a number of others. And it makes a lot of sense when you're running at this kind of scale because it enables you to service these developers with a product that you run. So this platform becomes a product. The challenge is when you adopt this kind of technology, but you start running it the same way you would have done infrastructure. So you have a very traditional operating model. And that's where the story really begins. Let me go back to that. So the beginning is really when you encounter this, and this is the starting point for us, is that everything that you encounter when you're trying to change the way this works is that everything is predicated on the idea that change is very, very costly and very, very risky. And you're walking around the organization and you're sort of hitting these garden rakes, and most of these rakes are the questions which are really based on the idea that change is really, really hard to do. And in this world, ops becomes very much the domain of people who like to be heroes, and they relish that. When you've got a multi-week cycle time, and your Cloud Foundry vendor is releasing new versions of the product several times a week, you have a problem, because you cannot hand crank that quickly, and you're always going to be exposed to CVEs, and you're always going to be behind the latest release. And big batch sizes are institutionalized in this kind of environment. And it creates a lot of risk and a lot of rework when you get everything wrong. So what we hoped to be able to do when we started working with this organization was that we were going to change the attitudes that people had to making changes in their environment. We wanted to reduce the cycle time, and we wanted to have happier teams as a result of this, and more scalable teams, because people would be able to learn more easily in this environment. And we wanted to lower the risk. The technical ingredients that we had at our disposal were obviously Cloud Foundry, which we were trying to deliver, but we added additional BOSH, because Cloud Foundry is built on BOSH, but we wanted to drive it in different ways, so we had to use BOSH directly as well. And we added Concourse CI, which is already mentioned here tonight. So Concourse CI is an incredible CI tool, which really is built for the cloud era. So it is stateless, it is declarative, it gets rid of all that stuff that you had with Jenkins before, where you've got like shared state across builds. So definitely check it out if you haven't already. And BOSH is a distributed systems management tool set. And it enables you to interact with underlying infrastructure and manage the life cycle of the VMs that you have running there. And that makes it possible to continuously deliver an entire platform of apps, which is basically what Cloud Foundry is. And we did all this on a very well-known public cloud you would have heard of. The results that we've had doing this are we've achieved continuous delivery in this new environment, building a new Cloud Foundry. We've managed to get complete reproducibility in this environment. So we're actually, there's nothing that isn't automated, and everything is expressed as code. So we can go from a standing start with an empty Amazon account to a completely fully tested Cloud Foundry, running all the smoke tests and everything else. One of the finest moments was when we managed to come into work at 9 o'clock, and the platform had upgraded itself from the latest release from the vendor the night before, while everyone was asleep, completely unattended. It took a while to get to that point, but with enough optimization, we eventually got there. It probably took a few weeks. And we eventually managed to get our first customer, their apps were approved by the bank, and they started to move forward with their customer beta phase. What this has highlighted to us is that operations in development in the world where a platform is basically a collection of apps, and that's what Cloud Foundry is, operations becomes like software development. So it makes sense for the team to operate like a software development team. And we've in fact been using XP values and practices. So we're always pairing in the team. We're doing TDD and we're using CI habitually. And we operate as if we are a product team. So we're not an operations team in this mindset. As I said, infrastructure is code in this world, and we're really doing that not to store everything in source control, but to communicate everything. So that's really important to us. So some of the things we've learned, which sort of emerged from this experience, were we realized that in the operations world, and when you're operating a platform in enterprise, the concept of dev means something very different to you to how it does to the developers who are using the platform. So we got rid of it. We started using animal names for the platform, which was sort of what you used to have in servers as pets world. But as well as being quite creative and fun, it means that you're taking away all the semantic associations that you have with this naming scheme. So we would have like monkey and tiger and dog or whatever else. Instead of calling them dev and stage and production, because that meant something to us, but it didn't confuse the developers. And we realized that build times, when you're continuously delivering an entire platform with dozens of VMs and RDS and CloudFormation and all this stuff, it takes quite a long time, and it takes a long time to test that. So it can take a few hours to go through pre-prod to prod. So we're continuously optimizing. That was something we learned how to do. And as a result of that, we sort of developed this non-blocking pairs pattern. So we would so that different pairs of engineers could operate and optimize the platform in parallel, we would spin up new lab environments entirely replicated from the production to work on. So we could actually have these pairs not interrupting each other or not queuing up to use the pre-prod environment. And something that's been quite interesting is that when you become much more self-reliant as an operations team, sort of adopting these values and practices, is that it changes the relationship you have with the customers of the platform, because you start to be able to say yes more often, and it changes the relationship with the vendor of your enterprise, because you're less reliant on the support of that vendor, and you can make decisions for yourself, and you're making fewer feature requests because you're able to react more quickly yourself. And something that was mentioned earlier is the challenge of achieving these sorts of things when you've got resistance within the organization. And it's been very obvious on this that there's a few patterns that we've used to help change radiate through the people in the organization. So co-locating everybody in the same place, taking them outside of their previous working environment has been very effective. And of course, when everyone's together, they can communicate much faster in smaller batches, so that helps people increase the feedback and the communication. Peer pressure really is quite magical in this environment. You just need to have enough people who believe the right thing, and they start to persuade the people who don't believe those things to behave in that way, and those people start copying the people who are using these practices and expressing these values. That's in contrast to when you sort of go in as the kind of clever clogs to say, oh, continuous delivery is amazing, and you're waving your hands around, and you're just a lone voice. So that is very ineffective, I've found, when trying to change organizations. But if you can create these people who believe the same thing, then they start to create other leaders. The final thing I wanted to say about this is that everything I've said only applies in this particular context. So I've been PMing a team for 3 months, and we've achieved these things, and we've learnt these things. It will be different if you tried to do this anywhere else. So these are not recipes for success. They are, there is no maturity model for this stuff. You just have to figure it out for yourself. You've got to hit those garden rakes in the lawn and continuously learn where they are and how to overcome them. So there's quite a lot covered in that. I appreciate that. And if you've got any questions, please do bring them up at the end or contact me at this place. Thank you very much.